And welcome back into another episode of the Believe in Georgia Tech podcast. We are your co-hosts. That is RJ Schafer. I'm Jackson Caudell, coming to you on Thursday, April 3rd. We are one podcast again. RJ was on vacation last week. We had our good friend Rohan come on to talk a little basketball, but now both parts of the podcast are here. So I got to say, RJ, how was vacation? How you doing, man?
Feeling amazing. Happy to be back. First time going out of the country, but we got to talk some Georgia Tech.
Yeah, and like there's plenty to talk about too, and it's not just spring football. We got a lot we're going to dig into. We got basketball, football, baseball, all that kind of good stuff. Um, but before we get into that, the usual stuff. If you aren't subscribed already, we would appreciate it if you did. Helps us out a lot. Like the video, tell your friends, tell your enemies. Just spread the word of Believe Georgia Tech. We're going to be cranking some stuff up here. Got spring game coming up next weekend. Baseball is really hot right now. So also, if you're following us on podcasts, be sure to like us over there. Give us a rating, whatever the heck you do over there for podcasts. And we really appreciate it. Thank you guys a lot for all that stuff. But I guess the first thing we're going to talk about is some retirement news. So last week, it was actually the opening day of the Braves season, which we're definitely not going to talk about. Danny Hall announced, or Georgia Tech head coach Danny Hall announced he was going to be stepping away after the 2025 season. Now his contract expired at the end of the year. There was a lot of speculation on what was going to happen there, but he announced that he was going to be stepping away, which is obviously very big news. I know that there is, and to some degree justifiably so, been some frustration. Georgia Tech hasn't gotten out of a regional in quite a long time, but Hall is he is a legend at Georgia Tech. I do think he has earned that. I mean, he's one of the 10 winningest head coaches in college baseball history. He's been at Georgia Tech longer than I've been alive. So that being at one place for so long is just like a tremendous accomplishment. And they've, for better or for worse, they've been really consistent. They've made the NCAA tournament. They generally have some of the best offenses in the entire country. I mean, let me reading here: 7 ACC regular season championships, 5 ACC tournament titles, 24 NCAA tournament berths, and 3 College World Series in his 31 seasons at Georgia Tech. 1,224 wins at Tech is a school record, obviously. ACC Coach of the Year 4 times, 97, 2000, 2005, 2019. In the ABCA Hall of Fame, honorary alumnus of Georgia Tech. He was named an honorary alumnus of Georgia Tech in 2024. Just a really legendary career. And again, I do know there's been some frustration over how some things have gone over the years. And look, that's fine. But kind of what was your reaction to hearing this, especially like we'll get in deeper into baseball talk as far as like on the field stuff, but like this team does seem to have I really do think they have a chance to send Danny all out happy. I don't know if I want to say on top, but I do think this team has a chance to be special.
Yeah, I think I think Danny Hall wanted to retire with a team where he just has loads and loads and loads of talent. Like this roster is so deep, especially in the bullpen that something we haven't seen in a while. The starting lineup is so deep. Pretty much everybody on the roster has an OPS over 700, which if you've been watching Braves baseball, it's about the
Not a
polar
lot of that.
opposite. Yeah. But Danny Hall is absolutely a legend. Like he had some time coaching the MAC before he coached at Georgia Tech, but he has been in Atlanta since 94. That's just, especially, with the way that college sports has adapted, you don't see guys coaching at one spot for, over 30 years. And I think he, definitely made a stamp, a ton of winnings, a ton of ACC tournament wins, ACC regular season championships. He's, taking care of Georgia for the most part in his time at Georgia, and he is, a Tech man, like you said. He's got an honorary degree, and he has led the Jackets to some pretty high heights in terms of baseball.
Yeah, that absolutely. Like he has consistently been one of the best coaches in the country, and like I said, I generally think this team has a chance to make a run. Like we're still
Sure.
getting into the meat of their schedule for sure, but with some tough series coming up. But they showed against Clemson, even though they lost the series, like they have the talent to go toe to toe one of the best teams in the country. Their offense is unbelievable, and the pitching's made strides this year too. So, uh, just a phenomenal career, and like I just cannot fathom being in one place for so long, and like that's a tremendous accomplishment. So, just congrats to Danny Hall on his career and all that. The other, then that one was not much of a surprise. I think a lot of people could probably see that one coming. The one that was a surprise was earlier this week when Nell Fortner, who did sign a 3-year contract extension that would have kept her through the 2029-2030 season, the women's head basketball coach at Georgia Tech, announced her retirement. Um, it was a bit surprising. I was at her press conference on Tuesday. I did ask her, hey, was this a sudden decision? Is this something you've been contemplating? She did say she had been contemplating it. She didn't go into specifics about how long, which is fine. Which was an interesting answer, just given again she did sign an extension. Obviously she wasn't there as long as Danny Hall was at Georgia Tech. But she did a lot of good things as the head coach at Georgia Tech. She was ACC Coach of the Year just a few years ago. She had a 110-75 record, 4 postseason berths. They would have also been a tournament team during the COVID year. We all remember what happened there. Didn't have a tournament. So, look, she also got Georgia Tech to their second Sweet 16 in program history, which was a great accomplishment. I know this year kind of fell apart a little bit. They started 15-0, sputtered a little bit down the stretch. We didn't get a chance to really go in depth on the NCAA tournament game against Richmond, but I think we all know that there was not really a need to. That game was really ugly. She did talk a little bit about the changing of college athletics being a reason. Now, she wanted to make sure to note that this was not the only reason she retired. But she did mention, NIL, transfer portal, all this crazy stuff happening in college athletics. And it should be noted that, a lot of Georgia Tech's team is currently in the portal as Jay Batt is looking for a head coach right now. I mean, Danny Carnegie's gone in the portal. Just a lot of what made Tech really good this past year is in the portal, and that's obviously a tough situation to deal with. But she is stepping away. So Georgia Tech will not only be hiring a new baseball coach, but a new women's basketball coach as well. I'll be perfectly honest. I don't have a lot of, as far as candidates go, I don't really have a lot of ideas. I'm kind of looking to kind of dig into that a little bit more. But kind of what were your thoughts on kind of what was a surprise retirement decision from her?
Yeah, like you said, Fortner's retirement was, by far the most shocking out of the two. She had, probably one of her best seasons at Georgia Tech. She had a very, very, very good team that year, ranked throughout, almost the entirety of the year. And she, like she said in a press conference, she's still going to be a fan of Georgia Tech athletics. Like, you're still going to see her at games. She's still, going to be involved with, some of the players that are in the transfer portal as it stands now. But she's a legend outside of Georgia Tech. Danny Hall made his name at Georgia Tech. Nell Fortner obviously coached USA basketball, won a gold medal in 2000, and she has a lot of coaching stops, Georgia Tech being the second longest outside of Auburn, where she made a name for herself. She's one of the best college basketball coaches, one of the most respected college basketball coaches. She brings, pretty consistent program wherever she goes. And it's sad to see her go, but again, like she said in her retirement, like, it was just time.
Yeah, and I agree. And I guess just to go back to baseball, I mentioned, not really knowing candidates for women's basketball. It'll be very interesting to see what happens with baseball, because I know the popular sentiment is to promote James Ramsey to the head coach. That very well could happen. Georgia Tech's one of the best baseball jobs in the country. Like, I feel very comfortable saying that. So you will have a lot of national interest in that. It'll be kind of interesting to see which direction Jay Batt wants to go in. Anything else on either of these?
Yeah, for both jobs, really, I think it will be an interesting search, because being in Atlanta, especially for women's basketball and for baseball, there's talent everywhere. So I think you are going to see a lot of exciting names, put their name in the hat.
Yep. And I think, finding somebody who can not only coach, but also manage the NIL and transfer portal landscape is just, it's a crucial thing nowadays. And you have
Mhm.
to find somebody that's it's able to do both things. And, that'll be that'll be what J-Bat has to do. So moving on, I guess to not great news. The basketball transfer portal has been very active and in a not a great way for Georgia Tech. When me and Rohan talked last week, Nate George was in the portal. A couple days later, Duncan Powell declared for the NBA draft, which, look, I like Duncan. I thought that was an odd decision. But then he reversed course a couple days later, announced he was going into the transfer portal. I know he's getting a lot of interest out there from several schools. And then today, Ibrahim Soare, he announced he was going into the transfer portal. So definitely losing those guys. You've already lost Lance Terry, who was, out of eligibility. Tough spot for the roster right now. The good thing is Bayandongo Dongo is still on it as of right now, and the recruits are still coming in. Like, still getting one of the best center prospects in the country, Akai Fleming, Brandon Stores, still bringing in some talented players. But it feels like basketball's in a very tricky spot here, and Damon Stoudemire's got to come up with some answers.
Yeah, and it's tough, especially when you lose two of your guys who were probably your biggest contributors down the stretch. Like you lose Duncan Powell, who uh, actually rose to ACC fame this year. People were talking a lot about his haircut more than his basketball, but he was, definitely one of the best scorers in that roster. So was Nate George. I think they're both going to find great destinations. Duncan Powell, obviously, entering back into the transfer portal. So he was a transfer into Georgia Tech. Nate George was a guy out of high school. Um, I just want to say that we can't have any more entries. No Dongo, nobody else on the roster. Uh, this core together, and I think bringing in a ton of high school recruits in this 2025 class. You have one of the best 2025 classes in the country. That's going to bring opportunity for freshmen to play, and I think that's you put yourself into a situation where you can have a volatile season. That means Georgia Tech could be very good next year if your freshmen are really good. We saw Duke obviously excel with a ton of really good freshmen, but we'll we'll see how that stands next year for Georgia Tech.
Yeah, and look, look, my job is to analyze and just talk about it how I see it. Like I'll just say on that point, I do think. Look, I'm not in any place to be. I don't want to be projecting, ahead right now, just because there's just so much that's going to change. But also, like, Duke had a lot of freshmen come in who were like, I mean, Cooper Flagg is a generational like player.
Yeah.
Like he is like a slam dunk number one pick in the draft, one of the best prospects we've ever seen. Con Knipple is going to be a top 10. He might move to a top 5 pick. I know he's getting a lot of love in the NBA world right now. And Common Malawach, he's going to be very sought after as well. So it's a little bit different from that. Like the point you made is good. I just just in terms of the talent level, it's just very different. And like I said, Damon Stoudemire's just got to come up with answers. And like he's recruiting well still. Like he's gotten those guys, but you've got to find some answers in the transfer portal. And I think me and Rohan touched on this. Maybe me and you did as well. But his transfer portal track record is not great. Some of that I will say is not all his fault. Like he couldn't help the O'Brien and Reeves getting injured this year. Javian McCollum also got injured, but even when he played, he was kind of up and down a little bit. A lot of the transfers he brought in that first year were not very good at all, and a lot of them ended up leaving. I mean, like guys like Amari Abram, who's also in the transfer portal again.
Mm-hmm.
That was a terrible signing, and it was just he's got to do a better job of identifying the guys to come in and make an impact. And they're going to need some of those guys. Like you need veterans on the team to replace Nate George and Duncan Powell. The depth that Soare did have to play towards the end of the year a lot. So look, we'll see what happens. It's time to find some answers. Is all I'm gonna say. Anything else on that?
Just to look on the bright side a little bit, I think it does give Stoudemire an opportunity to find an identity as a team. Now that you have so many guys leaving and you have so many of your high school recruits that you wanted to bring in. You can bring some guys in from the transfer portal. I think Georgia Tech basketball can have a true identity next year, but we'll see how the Jackets fare in the rest of the transfer portal.
Yep. So we'll wrap up with some football notes. Spring practices, rolling on like normal. I've been there every day that they've had it. They usually we get to go Tuesdays and Thursdays. We'll see a little bit of practice, maybe the first few minutes or so, and then we'll talk. Whatever coaches come speak with media. Talked to Brent Key on Saturday. They did have their first spring scrimmage, and I believe they're going to have another one on Saturday because we are slated to speak with Key again around noon on Saturday. So we'll have plenty of coverage of that. Some notable takeaways, and again, these just speaking loosely, like these are spring practice takeaways. Not saying they don't matter, but it's take them maybe with a grain of salt, and we'll see what happens on the field this fall, but just some notes I had. Traylon Maddox seemed to have a really good day at the running back spot, which is important because one thing we were going to mention in a little bit was, Anthony Carey did hit the transfer portal this week, former 4-star prospect. Me and you have talked about how deep we think the running back group is, and I think Buster Faulkner he said to us earlier in the spring, this is one of the deepest running back groups they've had. Obviously you've got Maddox, you've got Malachi Hosley, you've got J.P. Powell, you got Dalen Gordon still there, Chad Alexander. So it was. I don't think it's like, and I don't mean this like Anthony Carey is a talented player, but I don't know that it's just a tragic loss. Again, he's talented, but they do have some guys back there. And going back to my point about the scrimmage, Maddox seemed to have a really good day. Key pointed out Bailey Stockton and Dean Patterson both had strong days. Patterson, the FIU transfer. Stockton made some big catches last year as well. I did think it was notable because I kind of got the sense when we talked to Jeep Wade, and I mentioned this with Rohan last week, the offensive line, the right tackle position is something I think worth, keeping an eye on, because Key mentioned that they had some issues in pass protection. He didn't like single anybody out or like a single position, but his offense as a whole, struggled a little bit in pass protection. Now he did go out of his way to say the defense, made some plays. Jordan Vandenberg, who was a beast last year, seemed to have a really good day. Andre Fuller, the true freshman, he seemed to have a really good day. Braden Manley, the Mercer transfer, he also seemed to have a good day. He mentioned also Matthew Alexander, the UCF transfer, seemed to do pretty well. They really think the linebacker group is deep. We talked to Darius Eubanks today. They love what they got there. Brought some guys in the transfer portal. The only guy, we talked about this a lot. We think they got like 5 or 6 guys, maybe more than that they can roll out there. Saeed Gibbs got an interception. That was pretty good. Tay Harris, I think, is also flying around back there. But those were kind of the key points. Look, obviously, spring's going to roll on. We got the white and gold game next Saturday. We'll have plenty of coverage of that. Any spring football thoughts?
Yeah, I just wanted to quick touch on Anthony Carey. Again, it's not a knock on Anthony Carey. I, did a deeper dive into some of the ACC rosters. I think Georgia Tech has the deepest running back room in all of ACC, maybe the country if you go that far. Obviously, Haynes, ESPN ranked him as the top 10 back. Malachi Hosley from Penn, again, another great transfer. Chad Alexander. Like, the list was just so deep at running back that, again, it's not a knock on him. He's going to go find a good destination. He will play. It's just there are so many guys that you have to compete with on a day-to-day basis that, it sucks that somebody had to leave.
Yep, I agree with all that. But, like I said, the position battles are going to keep going. Yep. Right tackle is going to be one we're going to keep an eye on. The defensive line is one to keep an eye on. Cornerback is one I definitely have my eyes on as well. I think Harrison Moore seems to be doing pretty well at center. I know Jeep Wade talked about him a lot in the media session. Both Joe Fusile and Keelan Rutledge also praised him. So, I think that's pretty good. Again, it's not like a set in stone start, but the guys seem to think he's doing pretty well. Ethan McKinney at left tackle. We'll keep an eye on that. For the first, like last year, we've talked about it a lot. The offensive line brought back everybody last year. Weren't a ton of questions. got to replace some guys this year. So we'll see what happens there. But any other spring football thoughts? Anything?
I got nothing.
Well, this weekend, baseball does have a big series against Stanford. We've kind of brought baseball along slowly. We've been hit or miss here and there, but they did have a good series against Clemson. Yes, I know they lost 2 or 3, but I'm still thinking about the way they lost that third game. That was tough, but come back and they just leveled Mercer the other night. Scored 21 runs. Stanford's been pretty good. I know they got swept last weekend, but they've been pretty solid. I think their RPI is in the 30s. Georgia Tech is rising up there in RPI as well. Any thoughts on the Stanford matchup this weekend?
Yeah, I yourself another opportunity. Obviously, playing Clemson, one of the best teams in the country. Now you get a chance to prove yourself, go out and win a series in ACC play, which Georgia Tech, again, more than capable than doing. I think this is a good point in this, or good point in the schedule to start to get hot. Obviously, that big game against Mercer, and now you have a series where you can go out and win, and then you can keep stacking those wins. That's how good teams go far in the tournament, and I think Georgia Tech has the recipe. They have good pitching, and they are tearing the seam off the ball right now at the plate.
Good Lord, like that offense has just been, the first Georgia Tech team I covered a few years ago was the Kevin Parada team that lost to Tennessee in the Knoxville Regional, and like that offense was incredible. This one might be just as good. I don't know if I'm ready to go out on that limb yet because I just saw that lineup, I guess 3 years ago now, just shred top offenses. I think this team has a chance to be much better because the pitching on there, it was not great, to say the least. It was very much not great, and it prevented them from losing that game to Tennessee. But I'm not going to tear into old wounds there. But this team has a chance to be special. And like I said, the offense has just been awesome. Whether it's Kyle Lodice, Drew Burris, Alex Hernandez is still tearing it up. It's been awesome to see.
Kent Schmidt, Caleb Daniel, like the list is unlimited.
Yeah, I feel like Caleb Daniel he doubles at least every game. Like just watching. I feel like he gets a double at least every game.
Yeah, and if you go down the Georgia Tech baseball stat sheet, looking at some of those batting averages, like Georgia Tech is 4th in the country in batting average. The only Power 4 team ahead of them is LSU. Like
Stupid.
Ridiculous the amount of times they get on base per game.
Yeah. But baseball's been fun so far. They've got a big series against Stanford that starts tomorrow. We'll be covering all that. Anything else before we get out of here?
Got nothing.
Well, that's going to do it for our show today. I know this was a little bit of a quicker episode, but we appreciate you guys for sticking in. Know it's the off season, but again, appreciate you nonetheless. Be sure to go like us over on YouTube. Subscribe to the channel if you hadn't already. Tell your friends about us. Love doing this show for you guys. Hoping to keep rolling the content out this off season. Follow us wherever you get your podcasts and all that good stuff. Leave us a review. Love hearing the feedback from you guys, and we will see you next time.